Hi, welcome to Myriad Plots. This is Grace,
This is Jason.
and today we're going to be talking about recruiting players, which of course we need if we're going to play games.
Yes. Finding players, finding games in general is one of those big challenges for anyone doing role playing.
Now, especially these days where people, do not necessarily stay in the same town where they grew up with their local, group of gaming friends. Going away to college can be a challenge to find somebody who you want to play with. And of course, moving for a career or job.
Right. Yeah, as you get older, you no longer have the nice easy outlets of college or high school.
And less time to devote to that initial socializing that could lead to, hey, did you ever try role playing?
Right.
So
there are a lot of ways that you can go about finding new players. Traditional way that I think almost everybody's done, and the way it's almost always been done is word of mouth.
Mhm.
Basically, you talk to your friends, and you have a friend of a friend who also role plays, and so you get together and start a group,
right.
that sort of thing.
Or even, that maybe you have a small group that you've done a game with, or but you have a bigger plan that you want. Maybe you're going to do something a little bit more epic, and you want to have maybe 5 players, to run, and you don't have that in your local. So the traditional thing, word of mouth. If anybody knows somebody, you can invite them in. Of course, there's some problems that can sometimes happen.
Yeah, there's beyond the social awkwardness that many gamers suffer. I mean, there's the issue that you need to be able to play with these people.
Right. And just because, you're friends with somebody and you've had maybe a successful game with them doesn't necessarily mean that their friend who games, especially if they haven't played with them, but even if they have played with them and been successful, that doesn't mean that when you combine all of those personalities, it's going to be fun for everybody.
Yeah, getting the right mix and finding people that you can play with is a serious problem in recruiting players.
Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I mean, you can afford if you do have a core game, group of gamers, you can afford to experiment a little bit. And there's some tips that we might share later in the podcast, but generally, if you're interested in recruiting players, it probably means you don't have that local nexus of gamers to rely on. So you're going to be looking for, going a little bit further.
Right.
So some people tend to do sort of local conventions.
Yeah, there is that idea that you can go to the local convention, you can meet, have a chance to meet the local gamers, hopefully play a few games with them.
Yeah. And there's lots of local conventions. There's more conventions nowadays than there really ever have been, at least as far as gaming. I know, Gen Con Indie is getting bigger and bigger every year. And then, of course, there's local conventions everywhere.
Yeah. And I think you could certainly get into games that way. I've never personally done it.
Yeah. It's been a challenge for me, too. In fact, I've even exchanged phone numbers with somebody, at a local convention, and then, but it's never happened that I actually called them up or they've called me up, so so that we could actually play.
Right.
And I don't know what reasons those are, but even at a convention, even if you do play a couple games with somebody, it's a little hard to that's a very different environment than the environment that you might play a long-term game in.
Right, because you're specifically working in a one-shot, and where a player might be really fun to play with in a one-shot, in a long-term game, you might find that, well, actually, he just always plays that character, or he can't really be depended to show up on time, or show up regularly.
Yeah, or, you thought they were just, it was the second day of the convention, and, he hadn't showered for a while. You thought that was just that, but no, that's normal for that person,
Right.
I mean, we're kind of getting into cliche territory here, and, if you have had success finding new gaming friends at a convention, please, leave comments. That'd be great. But yeah, it really hasn't worked for either of us.
Yeah,
And we haven't heard of it working for anybody in
right.
our
Yeah, it's. I think
experience.
it's mostly an issue that you have a very short amount of time to really socialize with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think also with conventions, especially even if it is a local convention, it's just sort of a different beast as far as who you are at the convention and the time that you're in. So
Right.
that when you get back to your everyday life, even if you're a gamer and have your everyday life, it's calling that person. It's kind of two separate worlds
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah, definitely. So, what other options do you have? There's the old standby of going to the game store.
Hmm. Unfortunately, I think game stores, there's never a whole bunch of them, especially game stores that maybe have a little bit more. We're not talking like like the toy store that has
Right. No, we're
a
talking
rack of
about
games.
the store that sells role playing games, maybe some board games, and probably lots of Magic the Gathering or
Yeah,
whatever.
generally has a back room set up for tournaments, generally for Magic the Gathering or other cards, say
Yeah.
Pokemon.
Right.
And there's not that many. So if
It's a,
you're living out in a place that doesn't, that's very low population, that's the challenge in itself. And
right. Your local game store might be an hour or two away.
right. But I actually have had, well, a mild success at a local game store, and basically there is a maintained bulletin board, and somebody had advertised for that they were starting a campaign, and and I answered that, and I actually played I think about 4 sessions with them, and it turned out that person that the GM wasn't the GM for me. I had trouble understanding them with their speech, and I also felt a little bit manipulated as a player because of the world concept wasn't explained to me, So like I created a
Oh,
human and
I see.
thinking that because it was it was basically a D&D based system, and humans are sort of the default, in
Right.
that. And I had created a human, and it turned out that really the dominant race over everybody in that world was bird people,
Okay.
who I wasn't even given as a player template, even though there was a player who was playing
Right.
that. So I mean, that obviously, this is not to say that game stores are all going to turn out that way, but that's especially if you're going in completely blind to something.
It's always seemed to me that going to the game store to find a role playing group is very much like the option of last resort.
Right. It's limiting. I mean, not that many GMs advertise at a game store.
Right.
So you're lucky if you see 1 or 2 games advertised.
Yeah.
You're even more lucky if it's a game that you're familiar with or want to play. And then even beyond that, you have the personality and playstyle issues to contend with. So if you do have a local game store, I would check it out, especially if they have a bulletin board, especially if you're
Especially if it looks like a kind of place you'd actually want to hang out at.
right. I mean, and that is something that a game store has going for it. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the podcast about the how to go about
Yeah,
this.
vetting your group.
Yeah, but the game store, especially if it's the type of game store we're talking about, probably going to have a public, a place that's set up that
Where
you,
people can publicly play games.
yeah, where you can publicly play games and yet also have, a nice environment for those games.
Right. So, moving on, one place that I've had some luck with is gaming clubs. So, like if you're at a university, you might have an actual gaming organization.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, one of the ways that we wasn't the way that we first met, but one of the ways that we interacted with gaming.
Was an informal gaming club.
Yeah, it wasn't well. It was formal. It had.
Oh, right. Yes,
Yeah.
the Game Society.
Yeah. Are you when you say gaming clubs? What are you talking about? Maybe I'm not understanding.
Well, I'm talking more about role playing gaming group club.
Oh, so you mean like the Pathfinder Society and?
No. I was so some universities actually have like a role playing gaming organization. All those colleges have tons of student organizations.
Right.
and often there'll be one, or there may be one devoted to role playing.
How do those generally work? Because I never
Um,
really explored that.
from what I've seen, typically they're open to whoever shows up. There's usually a few people who are willing to run games, and they'll sort of cycle through the various GMs. In general, I would not play in a gaming club, but I find them to be useful for recruitment.
Okay, well, why wouldn't you play in one?
Well,
Why are you stealing the players away from the gaming clubs, Jason?
okay. So there are two basic problems with gaming clubs. They're open to all comers, which means that if there are good GMs there, they will be running games for 15 people.
That's true. Okay, I can understand that. Yeah.
So you don't want to actually play in those games, but there might be plenty of people you want to play with who are in those games.
Okay. Because they're good enough gamers to know the good GM.
Right. The other issue is that it goes back to my feeling of reaching into the bottom of the barrel. I have seen gaming clubs where there are a couple of members who basically can never be avoided there. They're the dirty gamer that goes there because that's the only place they can play because they can't be turned away.
Mm.
So that's why I don't typically play there.
Okay.
Also, I mean, the way the games work, they're usually less frequent than I would like,
Okay.
and so there's either less frequent or there's less progress.
Right.
So either way, you're not really getting a very exciting, nicely paced story.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I have found players that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because people who show up there are people like you who are looking for a group.
So, where would you find out about gaming clubs? I mean, if that's...
Well, it's easier if you're already in college.
Is it only colleges that run them, like the type that you're thinking of?
It's the only ones that I'm aware of. I mean, I guess high schools might have some as well, but
Okay.
I would not recruit. At my age, I would not recruit from high schools.
I can understand that, but, well, I guess I'm wondering, when you say that it's open to everybody, I mean, does that mean that, like, I'm just thinking if somebody out there is, in their mid-20s and looking, just moved to a university town.
That might be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really know. It would depend on how the
club's
the student organizations are set up.
And it would normally be advertised like on a school website someplace that you would find that
Yeah,
information?
school website or bulletin boards, that sort of thing.
Okay. So generally that's going to be used by people who are already in that college then.
Right.
Okay. Well, I know another thing that you generally do is read the gaming forums. Mostly you're looking for, new ideas for your own games. And
Right. Forums should be fairly useful that way. I've not used it, so I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying I've not actually used it to recruit players.
Looking for recruit.
But I know a lot of forums actually do maintain lists of where players are, so that you can private message them and ask them, oh well, I'm in the same area. Would you be interested in playing?
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Well, I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar with various role-playing forums, but I personally don't actually read them. So are we going to provide some links?
Yeah, I'll dig up some links to
some of the bigger forums. Okay,
yeah.
Sounds good. So is it mostly done via IM, like after you've chatted with, or you've interacted with somebody on the forum enough and you find out they live in the area?
Yeah, I think that's generally the way those things go.
Okay. So for the most part, they don't, because like I know other forums that I interact with will sometimes actually have a meetups type part of their forum, but do game forums not really have that? And most
not
forums
really.
already established. Okay.
No.
Well, speaking of meetup.
Yeah. So meetup is probably, in my opinion, the best thing for gaming that I have seen in recent years. We have had a lot of good luck with meetup groups.
Yeah, definitely.
Managed to get in some nice one-shots and recruit a few players.
Right. In fact, I think there's even been one time that we went to a local convention and you recognized somebody from a meetup site. But,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
which, even though we're not gaming with those people right currently, it starts to build closer understanding of somebody, and
Right. Right. And so, yeah, the meetup groups are nice because you can easily find people who
Mhm.
are interested in the same thing that you are.
Right.
So a lot of the meetup groups will be focused. There's like the Call of Cthulhu meetup group or the Pathfinder meetup group, and they all often have forums, and there's usually a fair number of people who are paying attention to that,
Right.
and so you can like say, well, I have this idea for this game, and see who responds, and then
Hmm.
set up a meetup, have everyone come in, and through that you can usually find some players.
From your experience on Meetup, like, posting that you have, that you're thinking about running a game, and the number of responses that you've got, what's like the percentage that have actually shown up and you've
So
succeeded?
this is seriously a recruiting tool. So do
Yeah.
not expect to have a group out of the box doing this.
Yeah.
I think probably maybe maybe 2/3 of the people who say they're interested will actually come, and of those, maybe a third of them will actually show up regularly enough to be players.
Right. But then again, I mean, if you're new to an area, it's actually not too bad.
Right. I mean, and the numbers are reasonable. In theory, if you did two or three meetups, you'd have enough players for a game.
Hmm. Definitely.
Or if you had some other players on the side, which is what I had, then there you go.
Cool. I heard you say that you kind of think that meetups sometimes can be flaky. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's the same thing with anything on the internet. There's always a lot of people who will chime in and say, yes, I'm interested. But when, it actually comes down to showing up,
Hmm.
they'll flake out, and
Right.
you'll be sitting there and be like, oh, well, so and so never isn't coming.
Yeah, yeah. So when you posted to Meetup for your most recent game, or the most recent game you posted to Meetup anyway, did you start with like a long running game that you were going to go for? Or how did you seduce the potential players out there?
Well, for the one that I actually posted, I had a few long running games that I was interested in running. I left it up to a vote. A few people chimed in. I said, all right, I'm going to run this one.
Hmm.
I don't think that's probably the best way to handle it,
Okay.
having done that. I think the way it turned out for my most recent meetup that I was involved in, where we actually ended up doing a one shot first,
Oh yeah.
was the best way to handle it.
Hmm.
So you might look at the game you want to run and say, all right, I want to use this system, so we'll do a one shot in this system,
Hmm.
so that I know I've or this setting, so I know I have the players that are interested in that,
Right.
and then from that you find those players that will show up regularly, and start the game with them.
Yeah, and that you're getting along with.
Yeah, because you want to
Yeah.
make sure that you can actually play with these people,
Yeah.
which is the nice thing about doing the one shot,
Right.
is you have the chance to talk to them, play with them a bit,
Yeah.
see if their play style is going to mesh with yours.
Well, and also, I mean, if you already have a longer campaign in mind, you're still, you can talk to them about that, see what their initial reactions are, possibly decide, okay, I'm going to change it a little bit, based off of what, I like this person, I want to play with them, and they're not totally into what I was thinking of running, so I'm going to change things a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But so definitely a trial run, especially, I really think a trial run is useful for almost every cold meeting.
Yes. Role playing is a social event, and so you want to be able to socialize with these people. So they need to be people that you feel like being at least somewhat friendly with.
Right, or that, or them with you, I mean.
Right. Right. It has to go both ways.
Right. And I don't know, what do you think for the trial run? I mean, I can definitely see, like, in a perfect world that you would run more or less the same system and or the same setting as what you want to do in a longer campaign. But, I think there's something to be said for possibly just kind of, trying a new system out and doing that. Or even maybe opening it up to a broader, like, board game style.
Hmm.
But, I mean, definitely with, like, the meetup itself is structured in a way that I think you have some more you have the power to specify things a little bit tighter and actually do a role playing game. But like
Yeah.
I could see really having trouble finding people, and you want to try a game store or something like that, or the local conventions.
Right. So you could do it. You could use a meetup group just to get people together to talk about the games.
Well, no,
About
no.
game.
What I'm saying is that even playing a board game with somebody and
Mm.
then probing to see if they might be interested in role playing.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
that's because at that point you still get that social connection that
Right.
feel for each other. And the nice thing about board games is that they're a little bit they're definitely finite.
Right. They're finite.
Unless
They're
you're playing
structured.
Civilization. Sorry.
Uh, that's a long game.
So I do think too a nice thing about the trial run structure
Yeah.
is that it's easier to do in a public location.
Yeah.
And since most of the things that we mentioned would, especially the online, tools for recruiting players, you do open yourself up to meeting somebody for the very first time who represented themselves in a certain way on the internet, but you really don't know anything about them, and you might not want to invite them to your home or go to their house.
Right.
So, we've had some success with playing with people in
Well, there was the pub and the restaurant.
and restaurants. And like I said, that's one thing that I think the game store does have going for it. If you have a local game store, is that they do have a space kind of already set up.
Right. Right. It's a little bit more conducive to playing a game.
Yeah, and my experience was the experience of someone entering a game. But if you're posting as the GM and you're going to run a one shot, that might actually work out for you. If or you may,
Yeah.
Like you said, even with Meetup, which is the one that's probably been the most successful
Yeah.
for you personally, beyond the word of mouth traditional stuff. You know, even with Meetup, you're looking at casting your wide net and getting one or two quality players that are going to work with you.
Right.
So if you can run a one shot at the local game store
Yeah.
and get one player, that's good. Then you just
Yeah.
got to do one more, or find one more other person to play. You can do something.
Yeah. Exactly.
You can actually start your big campaign.
Yeah. And I mean, there's another thing that usually comes out of that if you're starting a group is often you just need to get that first one or two people,
Mm-hmm.
and then then they'll bring in their friends and so forth, and you rapidly will end up with a group.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we wanted to say something about compatibility of play types.
Yeah, that's probably a topic we'll discuss a lot in more depth later on.
Yeah, I'm thinking it would be good for a blog or maybe one of our
Right.
Myriad plots.
Yeah, but I mean there are various ways of characterizing the play types of GMs and players. Some people break it up between simulationist and narrative versus gamist,
Mm-hmm.
and some people will be breaking it up into categories like munchkins or the role player or the power player.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it's good to think about that. It's, analyze your own game style a little bit and certainly analyze your own GMing style. I think ultimately, compatibility can happen with a lot of different people, but it does, in some way, there has to be a common vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, it depends to a certain extent on your flexibility and your player's flexibility. Mm-hmm. The less flexible you are, the more you're going to want everyone to be on the same page.
Right. Well, but I think that kind of goes to maybe analyzing yourself. If you are
Yes.
recruiting players,
Yeah.
and you have a long-term game that you're interested in running, that that you're kind of inflexible, then that would be a GM that I would say, you want to do a one shot pretty much in the system and pretty much in the setting that you're thinking of running.
Right.
Whereas if you're like, a very broad thinking GM and maybe you're not even 100% sure that you want to run that long-term game, you had an idea, but ultimately you just need players, then you can do a board game, or you can do something,
Right.
a new system that you always wanted to try.
Because in that case, you're willing to adapt, and it's more about making sure you can actually socialize with these people.
Right. And I mean the games that I play at a convention as a player, I trying new things. They're not necessarily what I would sign up for at the game store for like if it was a long-term game at the game store.
Right.
But maybe I should think about that. I mean, I shouldn't necessarily shut myself down, especially if I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere and I don't have any game friends.
Yeah, yeah. One thing is definitely important is to remain open to possibilities.
Or at least know what you want. I mean, yeah, being open to those possibilities can help you figure out where you are with the people that you're gaming with or potentially want to game with.
Right.
I mean, definitely don't make yourself so open that you're overlooking things in the new people that you're meeting that are going to be sketchy later on. But at the same time, don't just shut somebody down because they're playing in a way that you've never seen before.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's especially true about people who are new to gaming in general. They'll very much. Those are the best players, in my opinion, because they will attack things in ways that you never would have thought.
Yeah.
They're coming at it fresh, and they haven't been turned on to certain ways of thinking.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hopefully this helps people learn new ways of getting players. If you have ways that you've recruited players that we haven't mentioned or comments about it.
I should mention I've been taking a look at Obsidian Portal lately.
Oh, right. It also has an advertisement for games.
Well, and yeah, it actually has a map that when you create an account, you put in your location, and you can search for games that are going on, so you can kind of get maybe an idea of what games people are interested in the area. But you can also sort that for looking for looking for gamers.
Yeah, when I was talking about forums back then, that's the sort of map type of thing that I usually see.
Okay. But, okay.
Well, I mean, they'll have a map of, like, gamer here, gamer there, that sort of thing.
Right, but no, the Obsidian Portal actually has games that are being run. Like, for example, there's 3 games being run that are listed as looking for players in the town
Obsidian
next door.
Portal's a little bit better that way.
Yes.
They have that.
So I would throw that out as a specific thing. I haven't actually contacted anybody through Obsidian Portal, but... I know that's sort of an up-and-coming thing, and we talked about it in our first podcast.
Yep.
All right. So this is Myriad Plots, and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to our show. Please visit our website at noordinaryobsession.com, where you'll find show notes from this and other podcasts, along with our blog and Twitter feed. This has been a production of No Ordinary Media, all material copyright unless otherwise noted. As always, be kind to us and subscribe to our feeds. Good night.